crash.
The investigation will determine what caused this collision. But here's what we know about what happened from publicly available data. We've plotted the latitude and longitude and the altitude data from the passenger jet and the helicopter to show the routes that both aircraft took. You can see them here in green and blue for the passenger jet and red for the helicopter. Now, by 8:34 p.m., the jet had completed its descent to 4,000 feet and was circling back to approach Washington, D.C. from the south. As it completes that circle, it starts its final descent and began following the path of the Potomac River north to the airport. And the majority of planes arriving into Reagan Airport on that day did so on this runway on the left, but the plane was given permission to approach runway 33, the diagonal line here. Now, this airspace is often busy with helicopters, including the US military Black Hawk, which was on a training exercise. And this map shows the routes helicopters are supposed to take over the Baltimore-Washington area. In some places, helicopters are told to fly no higher than 200 feet, but in others, they can go up to 1,500. And it appears the Black Hawk helicopter took a standard flight path down towards Haines Point and past the airport. Now, the helicopter that is up here in red, it was flying lower and heading south. And air traffic control was aware how close the two aircraft were, asked the helicopter whether they could see the plane, a model of jet called CRJ.
Pass 25, get the CRJ in flight. Pass 25, pass behind this CRJ. Did you see that?
But again, this is busy airspace. There is a larger jet preparing to land behind the American Airlines plane, a potential distraction on the runway that is more commonly used. And at 400 feet of altitude, 140 miles per hour, the flight tracking stops, the moment of collision. CCTV footage shows a flash of light in the sky at 8:47 p.m. local time. Immediately, air traffic control asks other planes for assistance.
Blackjack 3, do you have any kind of searchlight or maybe anything on board that would help shed some light at the east end of the field? Over the top, head towards Anacostia and I'll call you back. Muscle 1-3, do you have any kind of searchlight on board?
Around 10 minutes later, boats are already on the water. This shows marine traffic in the area at the time. Scouring the dark waters of the Potomac, they quickly located the plane wreckage. And at this stage, it was still a search and rescue mission. A few hours later, it became a recovery operations, as officials said there were no survivors. And questions will focus on the helicopter in particular, whether it was in the right place, at the right altitude, and if not, why not? But disasters like this rarely have one simple cause.
Well, let's bring in Sally Gethin now, aviation industry analyst. Sally, good to see you this evening and get the benefit of your expertise, because what we've learned so far this evening is that there isn't a lot of information out there. This is still a very early stage in investigation into a fatal crash of this size. What are your early thoughts on seeing what has happened and following the story throughout the day?
Yeah, so obviously we've got different players here. We've got the two different aircraft. We've got the control tower as well. So I think increasingly it's looking like a communications issue, potentially, possibly between the control tower at Washington National Airport and the helicopter in particular, even though both those aircraft were flying their designated flight paths. It seems at the last moment the helicopter didn't have that situational awareness. So then we have to look where that takes us, and obviously the data from that control tower will be really significant. But it's widely known that that air traffic control in the United States has been an issue for concern for some time, actually.
Why so?
Well, because it's outdated, it's using analog systems in some cases. There's a shortage of air traffic controllers as well. So it really is due for an overhaul, and that seems to be kicked into long grass over and over again. But very recently there was a government watchdog, and one congressman was so exasperated, he said he was tired of airlines in the United States proclaiming how safe the air traffic system was. He said all it will take is one major incident for that to be exposed.
In that briefing from the National Transportation Safety Board, they did say, you know, this kind of loss of life in an aviation crash is very rare. But perhaps what you're hinting at then is that, you know, this is a problem that has been coming because of antiquated systems and staffing issues.
Well, that is the bigger picture. So
It may well not be the case. They have said they're reviewing all the data from air traffic control, as well as looking for that flight data recorder, recordings from the helicopter. But, you know, the bigger backdrop to this is what you're saying, is that this should be something that they're looking at.
I think regardless what the investigation shows up, I think further scrutiny on air traffic control in the United States is welcome. There was a system called the Next Gen system that was supposed to be brought in, but everything seems to have been delayed and delayed and delayed. And also, this is a weak point in the overriding regulatory structure as well, because we've got the incoming Trump administration. That means a changing of the guard at the very top. So the regulator, the FAA, is going to have a new administrator.
They had to appoint an interim boss today, didn't they?
Right.
Because of what's been going on, they had to get somebody in that job immediately. But we do know that regulation goes at a snail's pace. Trump administration has come in and moved quickly on things that they are passionate about and that they have promised voters. Do you think something like this will put the focus on this area and deliver some kind of change quickly, which it's been lacking perhaps?
I think it's a cold, sharp shock for the administration that right on its doorstep, an airport that many politicians and others in Washington, D.C. will use and possibly take for granted, has shown to be extremely weakened. So I think there'll be a very raw response to try and fix that. Having said that, the investigation follows a certain path, and it's laid down by an organisation called ICAO. And so initially what we can expect within the first month or so is a preliminary report after the initial forensics and the data's been gathered. And then much later, when everything's been put back together, including the debris from the planes, for example, we'll gain more insights, and that will be shared. But the aim of the investigation, obviously, not just provide answers, but it's not a blame game. The whole point is to provide transparency. If it was a blame game, the industry wouldn't learn, we wouldn't have such safe skies. And I just want to add that the US safety record is really strong, despite the concerns about the air traffic control system. And the last major incident, major loss of life, was 15 years ago. And in fact, the last major incident at this particular airport was back in the 1980s. So it's not like it's suddenly breaking down. The fact is that, you know, it's working very well, but that, you know, this incident will certainly be a big cause for concern.
Yeah, and a tragic loss of life as well. Sally, thank you so much for coming in to see us. That's Sally Gethin, aviation industry analyst. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you. We're still to come here on the UK tonight. The Bishop of Liverpool has announced that he is stepping down. This is over allegations of misconduct by 2 women. And tributes tonight to Marianne Faithfull, the 60s icon, who has died at the age of 78.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Hello, welcome back. Following a story we have been following all week, and the Bishop of Liverpool stepping down today after allegations of sexual assault and harassment were made against him. Dr John Perambula said he has decided to retire, but has vehemently denied the claims that have been made against him. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland has been following this story. And Lisa, we have been following this story for some time now, ever since a Channel 4 investigation came out into the Bishop of Liverpool. He denied all the allegations, but he's taken a step back today, retired. Why now?
Yeah, he's specifically saying that he's retiring, he's not resigning. Essentially, he wants to sort of saying he doesn't want to become the story, in effect. This is about the, as now former Bishop of Liverpool, John Perambula, who is facing allegations from two women. The first, that he allegedly assaulted a woman in Essex when he was a bishop there, repeatedly over a period of time between 2019 and 2013. And a second allegation that he allegedly sexually harassed a fellow Church of England bishop. Now, as you say, initially he was standing fast. He has consistently denied any wrongdoing and says that the Church of England has dealt with these issues. However, this afternoon, an announcement was made by the bishop himself saying that he was not resigning, but retiring. He's 58 years old. This is what he said: "I have consistently maintained that I have not done anything wrong and continue to do so. This rush to judgment and my trial by media has made my position untenable due to the impact it will have on the Diocese of Liverpool and the wider church whilst we await further reviews and next steps. I do not wish this story to become a distraction. This is not a resignation occasioned by fault or by any admission of liability." So fairly defiant there. He's going, but he's fighting. We've been getting some response. We've been talking to an advocate who represents survivors called Andrew Greystone, and in fact he's actually in touch with the two women who made these allegations, and this is what he had to say in response to that stepping down by the Bishop of Liverpool.
I was very sad that the Bishop of Liverpool's statement didn't have a word in it about the two women who have alleged that he abused them. There didn't seem to be any compassion there for them or understanding. There didn't really seem to be much by way of self-reflection. It's more a case of self-pity, really.
And well, Lisa, two women making allegations against the former Bishop of Liverpool. One of them, another bishop herself, and she's waived her right to anonymity to tell her story.
Yes, indeed. So this is the Bishop of Warrington, Beverly Mason. Now, as you say, of course, normally she would have that anonymity, but she herself has put out a pastoral letter to people within the Diocese of Liverpool. She's been absent from her position for quite some time now, since April 2024, and talking to people in the diocese, she very much felt like she needed to speak to them, that she needed to express what was going on for her. So therefore, she put out this letter to her community, which of course inevitably has become public. And within that letter, she said, and in reference to the Bishop of Liverpool, a bishop cannot be above the law. A bishop cannot be dealt with differently from a priest. If anything, a bishop must be held to greater scrutiny. I regret we as a church have not properly and satisfactorily addressed concerns that have been raised. My prayer is that now things have been brought into the light, there will be no more defendedness, but an honest scrutiny of what we are doing, how we are doing it, where the gaps sit and how we address them. I suppose we could say, is that the end of the matter? I think I can definitely say it is not. There are very many people within the church community, within the church itself, who say there still needs to be examination of these allegations, further examination, particularly of the Bishop of Warrington's allegations. And questions are also being asked about the Bishop of York, who is sitting in for the role, taking on some of the senior duties of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who himself, of course, resigned amidst a scandal back in November.
OK, Lisa, thank you. Lisa Holland with the details on that developing story. Lisa Holland, thank you. Now, the BBC has apologised to staff who felt unable to raise concerns about the behaviour of Russell Brand. A review by the BBC discovered that a number of people chose to stay silent about the presenter. He's facing allegations of abuse and sexual assault, allegations he has always denied. Well, this is what the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has had to say. She says the complaints against Russell Brand set out in this report are horrendous, as is the fact that staff felt unable to raise concerns because they did not think that they would be believed or taken seriously. For too long, there has been a culture of silence in the media industry where inappropriate behaviour like Brand's has been tolerated or downplayed. Power imbalances and a perception that certain stars cannot be challenged are sadly not unique to this case. The BBC and the wider industry must now urgently consider what more they can do to make sure that abuse and harassment by anyone, no matter who they are, is not tolerated in any of their workplaces. Singer and actress Marianne Faithfull has died at the age of 78. A 60s icon, she was one of the leaders of the so-called British invasion of the United States. We can speak now to Sky's Ashna Huranag. Ashna.
Yes, that's right. Miss Marianne Faithfull was just 17 years old when she was propelled, Sarah-Jane, onto our screens. A convent schoolgirl that was thrust into the limelight, into pop movie theatre stardom with her debut single As Tears Go By in 1964. It was written for her by the Rolling Stones' Sir Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. And as I say, it propelled her into an overnight sensation, really. But she really was a superstar whose personal life overshadowed her career. She was in this highly publicised 4-year relationship with Mick Jagger, which meant she was both a musician and also a muse for the band too. A lot of their songs were inspired by her. And being in this glamorous and notorious couple of the swinging 60s, in the height of the swinging 60s in swinging London, came with its challenges, came with intense public scrutiny. By the time it ended, Faithfull was addicted to heroin and she went on to spend, notoriously, 2 years sleeping rough on the streets of Soho in London. She made her comeback, though, on her own terms, and she successfully returned to the charts. Marianne Faithfull was, as many say, a survivor, an icon of the 60s, and she passes away today, 78 years old, within the company of her family in London. And to quote her, as she's previously said in her life, she has a life of very few regrets.
Ashna, thank you. Ashna Huranag there. The Princess of Wales has made a surprise solo engagement to a children's hospice in Wales today, where she has been named as patron, following in the steps of Diana and the King. Kate spent time playing with children and meeting families and staff in what was her second engagement this week, as she continues to make a phased return to royal duties. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, was there and sent this report.
Have you played any of the instruments? Have you tried this? The princess had sent some presents in advance. A gift for the children who come to Haven Hospice and their siblings too. Just the start of building up relationships, as she also announced that she was their new patron.
And are there many places like this in the community where you can really come?
The Forbes family have been coming here since their son Felix was a baby. It's been a lifeline for Mum and Dad through the hardest times.
We feel safe with him here, and we know that he can be taken care of, and that means more to us than we could ever say.
This is the place that we know when the inevitable happens, we want to be. And when that did nearly happen, it was the right decision, and we will make that decision again to come here.
There was no hesitation about where we would come. Yeah.
In the garden, every stone is for a child who's died, but also made happy memories here. Kate wants to show they can be a place of joy at a time when hospices are crying out for support.
Cost of living crisis that we have lived through impacts people's ability to give. and we rely hugely on the generous support of fundraisers.
But also now with a very high-profile supporter, and Dash Do is helpful.
It will make our job that little bit easier. Experts doing that job for us, but today has made their job in the ongoing months that little bit easier with the profile that Princess brings.
Here they insist you leave a handprint. First up was Felix's sister Maggie. Her hand not getting anywhere near Kate's dress. Then Lottie helped the princess. The king was patron before her. Kate now determined to make her own mark for some very special families.
It's huge.
Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in Penarth.
Sir Keir Starmer, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair were among the mourners at the funeral of Lord Prescott this afternoon. Lord Prescott, who served as the Deputy Prime Minister under Sir Tony Blair, died in November after his diagnosis with Alzheimer's disease. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, was in Hull for the funeral and sent this report.
In a humorous reference to his famous nickname, John Prescott's family decided they should arrive for his funeral in 2 Jags. Inside Hull Minster, 300 guests were reminded he was born not in Hull, but in North Wales, as spin doctor Alistair Campbell played the Welsh national anthem on the bagpipes. Gordon Brown, Chancellor and later Prime Minister, gave the first eulogy.
We extend our condolences to Pauline and to the family, and we celebrate a life well lived, a life lived to the full, a life that touched the lives and changed the lives of millions who may never have met John, but are today better off because of him.
Then it was Tony Blair's turn to pay tribute.
John was guardian of the party's conscience, but it's important to remember he was also its educator. Our relationship would never have worked had we been 2 peas in different pods.
The current Labour Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, read a lesson.
Some went out on the sea in ships. They were the merchants on the mighty waters.
Followed by another Deputy Prime Minister from a working-class background.
Swerving east from rich industrial shadows and traffic all night north.
Guests here have described this funeral as a gathering of the Labour clan. All the leading figures from Tony Blair's time as Prime Minister have been here. Politicians past and present added their tributes.
By dint of his own character, pulled himself up by his bootstraps and never forgot other people.
Great character, larger than life, the conscience for the cabinet. He made a real difference, but he also made sure new MPs like myself were welcome to Parliament.
John Prescott, it was claimed, will be remembered for fighting for what he believed in. John Craig, Sky News, Hull.
Coming up on the programme, we're going to speak to one of the nation's favourite Faithfulls, Alexander from the Traitors, on how he inspired fans of the show to raise more than £70,000 for a charity close to his heart. And in the sport, Toto Wolff admits he still isn't used to seeing Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari red. Better get used to it.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish,
Have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there.
What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
On the way, one of the nation's favourite Faithfulls, Alexander, will be here for the inside scoop on the round table and how he inspired thousands of Traitors fans to donate to the disability charity MenCap. But first, we're going to take a look at the sport with David Garrido.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The end of a playing career doesn't always mean the end of a journey in football. Tom Reynolds took a completely different route.
I joined Charlton Athletic at the age of 9 and then stayed there for 3 seasons and left around 12. And then the next year I joined West Ham, played just for 1 season and then got released. It wasn't a tough release, it was just basically you're not good enough, and that was fine. I'd played football for 10 years. I wanted to use that knowledge and go into something, and everyone that weren't making it as footballers were going into coaching and going into managers or physiotherapists, and for me it was a case that I was like, there must be something else.
From Reading and Charlton to working in analytics, then on to Russia with Lokomotiv Moscow and Germany with Eintracht Frankfurt. Tom has spent over a decade behind the scenes in football.
At the time, I'd never heard of performance analysis. It was only until I went to university that I knew that was an avenue. Performance analysis can lead to 5, 6, 7 different roles now.
Do you ever now miss playing?
Yeah, I think I still find it where I'm talking to a player or I'm talking to a coach where players are around and you see them going out on the football pitch and you're the one dragging the equipment or setting up the equipment and you're like, just want to put my boots on and get involved again. But I mean, there's a reason as to why I didn't become a professional footballer, and that was because I wasn't good enough. But also I'm proud of what I've achieved.
Breaking news, and England are under-17s world champions. They produce a remarkable comeback to beat Spain in the final in India.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, I have to provide a spoiler alert at this point, but on the other hand, if you haven't been watching The Traitors, where on earth have you been? Because I'm joined in the studio tonight by one of the nation's favourite Faithfulls, so much so that Alexander has inspired fans to donate more than £70,000 to the charity MenCap. He opened up on the show about his brother's story, his family's story, and said that if he made it to the end, he'd be giving the charity a share of the prize money. Alexander, so great to see you. Alexander Dragonetti, because you're all just called your first names on the show, aren't you? So you get status like Ronaldo, Kylie, Madonna. You just know it's Alexander. So when I read Dragonetti, I was like, who's that? It's Alexander from The Traitors. First of all, congratulations to making it to the final 5.
Thank you.
There are no right or wrong answers as to why someone wants to win a life-changing amount of money. And that moment on the show where you all sit round the dinner table and explain your stories, when it came to you, it was a real stop in your tracks moment about why you wanted to win that money. Perhaps you can relive that moment for us and tell us why you wanted to win.
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, I've just... I was unsure whether to raise it or to talk about my brother on the show, and it was sort of 50-50. It's quite a sensitive topic. They handled it beautifully. And I've been so glad that I did. I mean, the response has been fantastic. I think we're up to over £70,000 now, and that's incredible. Anybody who supports or raises awareness on what to me is an incredibly important topic, I'm so incredibly grateful. It's just the response has been fantastic.
So MenCap really helped your family, because perhaps you can tell us a bit about the charity, because your brother had learning disabilities.
Yes, that's right.
And as his carers, in a way, your parents needed a break, and you as a young man as well, because you were just a few years older than him. Tell us what the charity did for you as a family.
Yeah, of course. So for a week a year, my brother would go on this sort of summer camp, and I was a carer, but for different children. And I was saying earlier, you know, my brother would arrive with me, and then he'd just run off from me, and he'd just run into the sort of other carers, and he would be the centre of attention. You know, everyone would flock round him. He had this energy where he just drew people to him. It was just fantastic. And he was always just slightly cooler than I was. And I just sort of stood there and waved, bathed in his sort of reflected glory. So it was such fun for him. He had all this attention. He could just be so silly. And what that meant for him is that he had one of the best weeks of the year, probably the best week, but don't tell my parents. And for my parents, it meant they got a break. Because it can be truly fantastic having special needs children, and that's often overlooked, actually. But it can also be really challenging, and it often parents don't have much of a voice. And if I can create or help to create that voice for parents to help get them the support that they need, that would be probably my most proud outcome from the show.
Yeah, it's a particularly difficult time for charities, isn't it? Fighting for the donations when times are tough for people, so they really look at where they're donating their money, and you put across such a great case, as you did just then, for MenCap. Your brother is sadly no longer with us.
That's right.
What do you think he would have made of your performance on The Traitors and what you've done since, raising this incredible amount of money for something he loves so much?
Yeah, so he died when he was 17, I was 24. I hope he would have enjoyed seeing me on TV, primarily. I think he'd have pointed it and sort of got a bit confused how his brother, who he knows in real life, was on this thing that does other stuff.
He'd have been your biggest fan on the show,
why was I on the screen? I think that would have really excited him. And I think he'd have loved the buzz around it. I hope also he'd have been proud at the idea of his memory being used to help other kids. And he often used to say, you know, when we wanted to give away things from the house, of like, you know, I don't know, he'd have an old jumper or something, we wanted to give it to a charity shop, and he was sort of quite fiercely protective, and he'd only give stuff up when we said, you know, give it to another boy, and he'd be like, yes, give another boy. And that really resonated in his head, this idea of give another boy, that it would benefit somebody else. And he was so generous, or sort of thought of others like that. And I really hope he'd see this in the same way. You know, give another boy or give another girl. If we can raise money for that, to give another boy, that would be fantastic.
What an incredible opportunity you were given to go on The Traitors in the first place, because
Amazing.
Everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants to go on The Traitors, and I'm sure people are already applying for the next series. Thinking about it myself. But, you know, the opportunity to sort of raise the profile of that charity that did so much for your family and to raise money as well, you must feel like you won, really.
Honestly, this is just a different version of winning. And, you know, if I'd won, I wouldn't have raised anything like this amount of money that people have done. So this is absolutely a version of winning for me. I'm over the moon.
OK, well, let's get into the ending. Spoiler alert, there were other winners. There were two other winners.
Spoiler alert, it wasn't me.
Can I just ask, are you friends with Leanne? Because when you played that game, I feel like she took it quite personally. Are you guys friends now? Because I just think things got a bit edgy towards the end as everybody saw that money and nobody trusted anyone else when there were so few of you left. Are you all friends now?
We actually are all friends now. I was actually texting Leanne during the sort of final episode saying, I'm so sorry to have accused you, because I felt bad, because I accused her as well. And she was texting me sort of saying, oh my God, I got it so wrong and I'm really sorry. So actually, we've actually become really close since the end of that. And it's been really nice to get to know each other in a slightly less pressurised way. And
you have become the nation's sweetheart. Claudia turning Scylla and telling the nation you are single. So much speculation about your relationship status. To be fair, The Traitors way better than any dating app. I've had loads of questions about this from so many people. Are you still single?
I am. No further comment.
I wouldn't imagine for much longer. Alexander, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. And well done, because you've raised such awareness for MenCap, such an incredible amount of money, and you were just a pleasure to watch.
That's really nice of you. And once again, thank you to all those who...
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Alexander, and good luck with what you do next.
That's really kind of you.
That's all for the UK Tonight. We'll be back on Monday night at 8 o'clock. Next up, it is The World with Gillian Joseph. See you next week.